4 friends, 4 betrayals, 4 deadly outcomes. A trusted friend becomes a mortal enemy in the blink of an eye. Campfire laughter turns to screams, and long-held secrets explode into violence. Brace yourself for 4 chilling tales that will make you question every relationship you hold dear. Life seemed picture perfect in the quiet town of Star City, West Virginia. Teenagers filled the hallways of University High School with laughter and gossip. Among them were a trio of friends, inseparable to the world outside, but hiding secrets that would unravel in the most tragic way imaginable. Skylar Neese was a vibrant 16-year-old, known for her intelligence and aspirations for the future. The straight-A student was the only child of Dave and Mary Neese. She had an infectious smile and sharp wit, and was beloved by her family and friends. Her presence on social media reflected the typical highs and lows of teenage life. But in the weeks before her disappearance, her tweets hinted at signs of underlying tensions in her friendships. On June 9, 2012, Skylar tweeted, "It really doesn't take that much to piss me off," hinting at growing frustrations. Then, on July 4th, she expressed feeling left out, tweeting, "Sick of being at home. Thanks, friends. Love hanging out with you all too." The ominous tweets continued. On July 5th, Skylar posted a tweet that would later seem hauntingly prescient. "You doing shit like that is why I never completely trust you." This final tweet hinted at betrayal and a breach of trust between her and her best friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shove. The 3 girls had formed a close bond early on, with Sheila and Skylar having been friends since childhood. Sheila was known for her outgoing nature and was often seen as the life of the party among her peers. To outsiders, she appeared to be a loyal friend and a devoted student. Then in high school, Rachel joined the clique, appearing to be a well-adjusted teenager with a friendly demeanor. The girls were almost like family to Skylar's parents, not even knocking to enter the family home. However, as their relationship deepened, cracks began to appear, particularly as rumors of a romantic involvement between Sheila and Rachel surfaced. Skylar felt increasingly alienated, her tweets indicative of her escalating feelings of betrayal and isolation. On the night of July 6, 2012, Skylar returned home from a late shift at her job. She kissed her parents goodnight and retreated to her bedroom, seemingly ending her day. However, a late-night call from Sheila and Rachel lured her out again. She snuck out of her family's apartment, believing she was heading for a fun night out with her 2 closest friends. Surveillance cameras captured her willingly getting into a car with Sheila and Rachel. What she didn't know was that this would be the last journey she would ever take. As dawn broke the following morning, Skylar's parents grew concerned when they found her bedroom empty. Panic set in as they realized she hadn't returned. They contacted friends and neighbors, hoping for news, but as hours passed without word from Skylar, the Neese family reported her missing. Sheila and Rachel, at the heart of this tragedy, played their roles convincingly. They joined the search efforts, expressing worry and heartbreak over their missing friend. Then, the day after her best friend supposedly vanished, Rachel left for a 2-week church camp. Meanwhile, Sheila, in particular, maintained a close relationship with Skylar's parents, attempting to deflect any suspicion. She publicly lamented her friend's disappearance, posting online about her hopes for Skylar's safe return and helping with the investigation, seemingly distraught over her friend's absence. Yet, beneath her facade, there were subtle hints of inconsistency. Did the two know something more? According to Sheila, Rachel and her picked up Skylar at 11 p.m., then dropped her off before midnight. However, the surveillance video showed otherwise. The grainy footage showed Neese leaving her apartment at 12:30 a.m., the car pulling away at 12:35 a.m., and then never to be seen again. However, it wasn't just the timelines that were inconsistent. The events of that night changed with each retelling. Sheila, for instance, described specific locations they supposedly visited, while Rachel gave different accounts of their route and the timing of events. Investigators noted these discrepancies, which became more glaring as the weeks passed. Sheila's demeanor, confident and unfazed, contrasted sharply with Rachel's growing anxiety, further raising suspicions about their involvement. What were the girls hiding? And how long could they maintain their story? Rachel began to unravel under the weight of her guilt. Her behavior became increasingly erratic, and she struggled to maintain the pretense of innocence. Then, on December 28th, a 911 call came in that would ultimately crack the case wide open. "I have an issue with a 16-year-old daughter of mine. I can't control her anymore. She's hitting us, she's screaming, she's running through the neighborhood." The caller was Patricia Schoaf, Rachel's mother. In the background, Rachel is heard wailing unintelligibly. Patricia says to Rachel, "Give me the phone." No, this is over. This is over." And then to the dispatcher, "My husband's trying to contain her. Please hurry." Rachel was admitted to a mental health facility for a few days. Then, after Sheila visited her friend at the facility, Rachel went to the authorities. In a moment of overwhelming guilt and fear, Rachel confessed to murdering Skylar, revealing the shocking truth that had eluded investigators for months. Rachel disclosed how she and Sheila had planned and executed the murder, driven by fear. The revelation left everyone questioning how two seemingly ordinary teenagers could have conceived and carried out such a tragedy. In a chilling flashback, the meticulous planning of the murder unfolded. Sheila and Rachel, driven by fear of their secret relationship being exposed and growing resentment towards Skylar, spent months plotting the crime. They discussed their plan over the better part of a year, detailing every aspect with a cold precision. On the night of the murder, Sheila and Rachel had lured Skylar out of her home with the promise of a fun adventure. Skylar remained unaware of her fate as they drove into the isolated woods. Once they reached a secluded spot, they walked into the forest to find a place to smoke weed. When they found a clearing, the signal was given. The two girls counted to 3 and began brutally stabbing Skylar in the back. She tried to fight off her attackers, but sadly succumbed to her wounds. According to Rachel, the last thing Skylar said was, "Why?" When police posed the same question, Rachel's chilling response was as simple as it was shocking. "Well, we didn't like her, and didn't want to be friends with her anymore." The two left her body hidden under branches and leaves, erasing their tracks as they fled into the night. Then, in early January, Rachel led investigators to a snowy area in the woods where they killed Skylar, but she couldn't pinpoint the exact spot. A week later, authorities made a breakthrough when they discovered the nearly unidentifiable body of the 16-year-old in the woods. It wasn't until March 13th that a crime lab could officially confirm the remains belonged to Skylar. Sheila's Twitter post on that day, March 13th, 2013. The case against both girls was solidified by Rachel's cooperation with law enforcement, including guiding them to Skylar's body in the Pennsylvania woods. Rachel was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, to which she pleaded guilty on May 1st, 2013. Her cooperation with the authorities significantly affected her receiving a lesser charge. In February 2014, Rachel was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with a possibility of parole after 10 years. She is projected to have an April 2028 release date. Meanwhile, Sheila, who's yet to be arrested, posted these tweets. Later that day, an FBI analysis found Skylar's blood DNA in the trunk of the car Sheila drives. She was arrested that same day, almost 18 months after Skylar's death. Sheila pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with mercy. She'll be eligible for parole in May 2028 after serving 15 years. Skylar's parents channeled their grief into activism, pushing for legislative changes that would better protect vulnerable teenagers. Their advocacy led to the passage of Skylar's Law in West Virginia, which mandates immediate public alert for missing children believed to be in danger, regardless of whether they are considered runaways. When the peace of a camping trip shatters with a shocking act of violence, it begs the question, what happens when two best friends set out on an adventure, but only one makes it back alive? On the evening of August 21st, 2015, two best friends ventured into the woods for what should have been a relaxing getaway. But in the early hours of the following morning, firefighters responding to a brush fire made a gruesome discovery. As firefighters raced to Bucks Lake in Northern California to combat the fire, they had no clue that they would find themselves at the center of a murder investigation. As they fought to contain the blaze, their efforts were interrupted by a horrifying discovery. A young man lying nearly unconscious, with multiple stab wounds to his neck. The situation soon escalates when they come across a charred body, smoldering in a campfire pit, smoke still rising from the remains. The semi-conscious man's injuries suggested a vicious attack, but the events that had unfolded remained a mystery, as was the identity of the charred victim and the circumstances surrounding their death. Soon, a chilling narrative began to take shape, one that told of a fueled camping trip, gone terribly wrong. Trevor Holminski and Sheldon Stewart had been the best of friends. Trevor's roommate introduced the two, and from the start, the two forged a strong connection, bonding over shared interests like art, music, and their mutual fascination with exploring the great outdoors while under the influence of LSD. Sheldon was an easygoing, nature-loving creative from Oakland. The art student from Expression College in Emeryville was also a local pitmaster at a barbecue shop. His friends described him as gentle and laid back. Trevor, on the other hand, was a 20-year-old from Antioch, living life on the edge. Studying sound engineering at the same college as Sheldon, Trevor was adventurous and graduated with honors from a wilderness survival course in his late teens. He even created a film, A Blue Crow, documenting his life-changing experience. Among his close circle of friends, there were murmurings about his bisexuality. Trevor's roommate even recalled a conversation where he wished that Sheldon could be gay for a day. Trevor was planning to join the Marines, so the two friends decided to have one final adventure before Trevor enlisted, a farewell trip to their youth and the pristine wilderness of Bucks Lake. As the two best buddies left the Bay Area for their camping excursion, neither could have foreseen the grim fate that awaited them in the remote wilderness. The two set up camp between Sandy Point and Mill Creek Campground, an ideal spot away from the bustle of nearby campers. As night fell on their secluded campsite, the friends embarked on a journey that would alter their lives. Under the starry skies of the outdoors, the two took around 20 hits of LSD, commonly known as acid, plunging them into a state of profound intoxication. As the psychedelic effects took hold, Sheldon claimed that Trevor's behavior took an unsettling turn. He alleged that Trevor began to make unwanted sexual advances. Sheldon claimed that he firmly rejected these advances, reminding Trevor of the platonic nature of their friendship. However, Trevor allegedly became increasingly insistent, his behavior growing more aggressive as he attempted to coerce Sheldon into a situation that made him deeply uncomfortable. The young man allegedly felt trapped as Trevor's persistence began to take on a more menacing tone. According to Sheldon, he was trying to sleep when Trevor suddenly attacked him, stabbing him repeatedly in the neck with a knife. He claimed to have been stabbed approximately 10 times, leaving him bleeding profusely and fearing for his life. In a desperate struggle for survival, Sheldon alleged that he managed to wrestle the knife away from Trevor and struck back in self-defense, stabbing his friend in the arm. As the altercation reached a fever pitch, Trevor allegedly fled the scene, disappearing into the woods, leaving Sheldon to deal with his injuries. Investigators had no reason to doubt his story, as he had a clean record and reputation for being easygoing. They feared that Trevor, potentially unhinged by the drugs, had become a homicidal threat, possibly still lurking in the wilderness after attempting to kill his best friend and burning an unknown camper's body. However, a shocking revelation emerged as the investigation progressed that would completely upend the initial assumptions. The autopsy of the charred remains body was not that of an unknown camper, but rather Trevor himself. Investigators were initially puzzled by the discrepancy between Sheldon's claim that Trevor had fled into the woods and the discovery of a charred body in the pit. This inconsistency would later prove crucial in unraveling Sheldon's story. The autopsy report confirmed multiple stab wounds, with a lethal injury piercing his chest. The autopsy also revealed that Trevor was dead before the fire started. This chilling discovery quickly cast doubt on Sheldon's version of events, raising questions about what had transpired on that camping trip. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they uncovered evidence contradicting Sheldon's account. Firstly, the nature of his wounds raised suspicions. The cuts on his neck appeared too uniform and superficial to be consistent with a violent struggle, as one would expect in a fight for survival. Additionally, the slash marks on his wrists, which Sheldon admitted self-inflicting, further fueled doubts about his story. Using a metal detector, investigators found critical evidence buried at the crime scene: Trevor's wallet and identification, as well as the murder weapon, the knife Sheldon claimed Trevor had used to attack him. The investigators wondered why the items had been buried, if not to conceal evidence. With mounting evidence contradicting Sheldon's story, the investigation shifted from a search for a potentially dangerous fugitive to a murder inquiry focused squarely on the surviving camper. Soon, Sheldon's account began to unravel, and he was arrested. As the case moved to trial, the courtroom became a battleground where Sheldon's version of events would be tested. In court, the prosecution dismantled Sheldon's claims of self-defense and accused him of cold-blooded murder. They highlighted the physical evidence, including the lack of defensive wounds on Sheldon's body, which contradicted his account of a violent struggle with Trevor. Additionally, the uniform nature of Sheldon's neck wounds, as well as the discovery of the murder weapon buried at the crime scene, further undermined his credibility. Furthermore, an arson expert testified about the fire's origin and spread. The expert presented evidence suggesting that the blaze was deliberately set and stoked, supporting the prosecution's allegation that it was intended to destroy evidence. The defense presented their version of events as a tragic misunderstanding fueled by drugs and emotions. They argued that Sheldon, in a state of panic and fear, acted to protect himself from a friend who had become a threat. Then, in a desperate attempt to avoid the harshest consequences, Sheldon's defense pivoted to a startling strategy, asserting that he had indeed killed Trevor, but only at his friend's pleading request. They argued that after being stabbed, Trevor had begged Sheldon to end his suffering, framing the act as a mercy killing born out of compassion. Despite this 11th-hour claim, the jury remained unconvinced by Sheldon's ever-changing justifications. After weighing the evidence, they found him guilty of first-degree murder, rejecting his self-defense and mercy-killing narratives as implausible attempts to escape accountability. After 16 days of intense testimony and deliberation, the jury retired to consider the case. Despite the complexities and conflicting narratives, they reached a verdict in less than a day. Sheldon Stewart was found guilty of first-degree murder and arson. In June 2016, Sheldon was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison. From the isolated shores of Bucks Lake, we descend into the heart of the Bible Belt, where appearances are everything and secrets run deep. In this tight-knit community, a disappearance will unravel a web of lies so intricate it will take nearly 2 decades to untangle fully. What drives a person to plot the murder of their spouse? In the dark waters of Lake Seminole, the body of a missing man lay concealed for nearly 2 decades in the silence of a perfect crime. When Mike Williams vanished on a hunting trip, the world believed he had fallen victim to the lake's alligators. But the truth was far more sinister. The Williams family embodied the American dream. Mike Williams was a successful real estate appraiser in Tallahassee, Florida. Known for his dedication to his work, Mike had built a promising career that allowed him to provide well for his family. His life was anchored by his high school sweetheart and wife, Denise. Together, they had built a picture-perfect life, raising their young daughter. On December 16, 2000, Mike left home before dawn to go duck hunting at Lake Seminole. It was the couple's wedding anniversary, and the two planned to celebrate the evening. But his family and friends quickly grew concerned when he failed to return home as planned. Authorities soon launched a massive search operation, scouring the lake for any sign of him. The search discovered Mike's boat abandoned on the water, along with his Ford Bronco parked nearby. His shotgun was found inside the boat, and his waders were floating near the shoreline. Despite these discoveries, there was no trace of Mike himself. Early in the investigation, officials proposed the theory that Mike had fallen overboard and drowned. The waters of Lake Seminole were infested with alligators, leading many to believe that his body had been consumed by the reptiles, erasing any trace of his existence. While plausible, this explanation left many questions unanswered and was deeply unsatisfying to those who knew him best. Behind closed doors, a tangled web of deceit was beginning to unravel. Mike and Brian Winchester had been trusted friends since high school. The two were close and would often hang out together with their wives. As an insurance agent, Brian had recently sold Mike a substantial life insurance policy worth $1.75 million. The timing was suspicious, and as whispers of infidelity began to circulate, the narrative of an accidental death started to crumble. Brian and Denise were not just friends. They were embroiled in a secret affair. This clandestine relationship was driven by more than passion. It was fueled by greed and the desire to eliminate the obstacles standing in their way, namely, Mike. Together, they crafted a plan that was as cold and calculating as it was shocking. The affair began in 1997, 3 years before Mike's disappearance. It was a secret passion hidden behind the two seemingly happy marriages. Denise and Brian were both driven by a desire to be together, but divorce was not an option they were willing to consider. While the world moved on, Cheryl, Mike's mother, refused to let her son's memory fade. She contacted authorities and the media, demanding that the case be reopened. Her persistence kept the story alive despite the odds stacked against her. For years, the case remained dormant, just another cold file gathering dust in the Florida Department of Law Enforcement archives. The theory that Mike had drowned and been eaten by alligators was accepted by many as the most plausible explanation, despite the lack of concrete evidence. Until a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In the years following Mike's disappearance, Brian and Denise's relationship evolved in unexpected ways. They married in 2005, but the relationship began to sour as paranoia and mistrust seeped into their lives. By 2012, Denise had filed for divorce, citing emotional abuse and a deteriorating relationship. The turning point in the case came in 2016, when Brian, unable to cope with the divorce and fearing exposure, kidnapped Denise at gunpoint. In a desperate attempt to prevent her from leaving him and possibly revealing their secrets, Brian held Denise captive in her car for hours, threatening her life. She managed to calm him down and later reported the matter to the police. Brian's arrest for kidnapping cracked open a dark secret he had kept hidden for years. To avoid a lengthy prison sentence, Brian struck a deal with prosecutors. He would get immunity for full confession. He revealed the details of the plot he and Denise had devised and executed on that fateful December morning. The truth was as shocking as it was brutal. According to his confession, he and Denise had planned Mike's murder for months. While out duck hunting, Brian pushed Mike into the water, thinking his clothes would weigh him down and drown him. When Mike managed to grab onto a stump, Brian fatally shot him in the head. Then he moved Mike's body to a remote area in Leon County, where he buried it. With Brian's confession, law enforcement finally had the evidence they needed. In October 2017, Mike's body was discovered buried in a remote area in Leon County. The autopsy confirmed that he had died from a gunshot wound to the head, putting to rest the alligator theory once and for all. In May 2018, Denise was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact. Her trial became a media spectacle, drawing attention to the complex and twisted nature of the case. Brian took the stand as the prosecution's star witness in the courtroom. He recounted the affair with Denise and their calculated plan to murder Mike for insurance money. He described how they had been driven by a desire to be together without the burden of a messy divorce. The testimony painted a chilling portrait of betrayal and greed. The trial unveiled the depths of Denise's involvement in the plot. The prosecution painted a picture of a cold, calculating woman who had conspired with her lover to kill her husband for financial gain and the freedom to be together. They pointed to the quick collection of life insurance money and her subsequent marriage to Winchester as evidence of her complicity. Denise's defense team, however, argued that she was as much a victim as Mike had been. The only person accusing Denise of involvement in the murder plot, they pointed out, was Brian, a confessed killer with every reason to lie. After deliberating for 8 hours, the jury found Denise guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact. In February 2019, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder and conspiracy charges, with an additional 30 years for her role as an accessory after the fact. The sentence ended a case that had haunted the Williams family for nearly 2 decades. Brian, despite his immunity from murder charges, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the kidnapping of Denise. Next, we shift our focus to a saga that spans coast to coast. A story so bizarre, it seems ripped from the pages of a thriller novel. Robert Durst is a name that resonates with intrigue, privilege, and scandal. The eldest son of one of New York's most powerful real estate magnates, he was born into a world of immense wealth and influence. But beneath the facade of affluence lay a life of mystery and crime. In the fall of 1971, Robert, an heir to the Durst family real estate fortune, met a bright and lively dental hygienist, Kathy McCormick. At just 19, Kathy lived in one of the many buildings owned by Robert's family. The couple married 2 years later. But behind closed doors, the relationship had deteriorated, and Kathy confided in friends about Robert's controlling and abusive behavior. Kathy considered divorce, but found herself trapped by an unfair prenuptial agreement. The document reminded her of the power imbalance that had always existed between them. As their marriage crumbled, both sought solace in affairs. But Kathy's friends and family were all relieved when she was finally on the verge of divorcing Robert. Fate, however, had a different plan, setting the stage for a mystery that would haunt the lives of everyone involved. On January 31st, 1982, Kathy attended a party at her friend's house. It was supposed to be a night away from the tensions at home. But during the party, an angry phone call from Robert shattered Kathy's brief escape. Before leaving, Kathy told her friend, "If something happens to me, check it out. I'm afraid of what Bobby will do." These chilling words would be the last anyone other than Robert would hear from her. 5 days later, on February 5th, 1982, Robert reported Kathy missing. He claimed that after a heated argument, she left their South Salem home, insisting on returning to the city. Robert said he drove her to the station in Katona, where she planned to catch a train back to Manhattan. He said he later spoke to her by phone when she arrived at their apartment. According to Robert, a doorman saw Kathy entering the building, and a call to a medical school made by someone identifying themselves as Kathy seemed to corroborate his story. Yet the picture he painted was far from clear. As winter turned to spring, Kathy's friends grew increasingly uneasy. They found her mail discarded in the trash, unopened. Convinced something was wrong, they went to the police with their concerns. Doubts began to cast shadows over Robert's account. The doorman admitted he had only seen Kathy from behind, and the details of Robert's call from a payphone did not add up. The nearest payphone was miles from his house. Despite these inconsistencies, the lack of concrete evidence kept the case classified as a missing person investigation. Kathy's disappearance remained a mystery. 8 years later, in 1990, Robert divorced Kathy in absentia, legally severing ties to his missing wife. Then, in the summer of 2000, the past had again started to close in on Robert. New York police had begun to take a renewed interest in Kathy's disappearance. They contacted Robert's longtime friend, Susan Bernam, hoping she might hold clues about Kathy's fate. Bernam had been Robert's confidant for years and his unofficial spokesperson during the initial investigation. Then, a tragic discovery was made on Christmas Eve. Susan was found murdered in her LA home, shot execution style in the head. There were no signs of forced entry, and her valuables were untouched, a sign that she likely knew her killer. An anonymous letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department directed them to her home, stating simply, "Cadaver." Susan's murder renewed suspicions around Robert. The timing and circumstances of her death raised suspicions, particularly regarding what she might have known about Kathy's disappearance. Yet, despite the suspicions, no direct evidence could link him to the crime. In the spring of 2001, Robert decided to add another layer of intrigue to his already complicated life. He moved to Galveston, Texas, adopting the disguise of a mute woman named Dorothy Siner, a former high school classmate. He attempted to live anonymously, renting a small apartment in a boarding house. His neighbor was Morris Black, an older man who would become an unwitting participant in the next chapter of Robert's saga. On September 30th, 2001, a gruesome discovery was made. A torso was found floating in Galveston Bay, drawing intense police attention. Investigators traced the evidence back to Robert's boarding house, setting off a chain of events to unravel the carefully constructed life he had built in Texas. Days later, police searched the boarding house and discovered blood evidence linking Robert to Morris's murder. However, he was released on bail and disappeared, leaving law enforcement scrambling to track him down. As the search for Robert intensified, another chapter from his past was quietly closed. In November 2001, Kathy Durst was declared legally dead. Then, the drama took an unexpected turn when Robert was arrested in a Pennsylvania supermarket. In a bizarre twist, he was caught shoplifting a sandwich, despite having more than $500 in cash. A search of his car revealed more money, a cache of weapons, and Morris Black's driver's license. After a 2-year trial, he was acquitted of murdering Black, despite admitting that he fatally shot and dismembered Black's body. In 2010, his enigmatic life again captured the public attention with release of All Good Things, a film inspired by his life and the mystery of his wife's disappearance. Against legal opinion, Robert reached out to the film's director, Andrew Jarecki, setting in motion a series of events that would lead to The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, a documentary series that would ultimately play a crucial role in Robert's eventual downfall. During a recorded interview, Robert was confronted with damning evidence linking him to the murder of his close friend Susan. An envelope he had sent Susan matched the handwriting of the cadaver letter. During a private moment, unaware that his microphone was still on, Robert muttered to himself, "Kill them all, of course." This chilling admission would become a turning point in his story. In early 2014, the LAPD reopened its investigation into Susan's murder, fueled by new insights gained from the documentary. They subsequently concluded that Robert had indeed written the cadaver letter. As the documentary aired in March 2015, Robert went on the run when an arrest warrant was issued for Susan's murder. Just 4 days later, he was arrested in New Orleans. At the time of his arrest, he was found with a revolver, a latex mask, and $40,000 in cash. The revelations from the documentary prompted authorities to explore potential connections to other disappearances, including that of a college student who vanished in 1971. Robert's legal battles continued to unfold. In 2016, he pled guilty to gun charges stemming from his arrest in New Orleans, resulting in a federal prison sentence. But Robert pleaded not guilty to the charge of murdering Susan. After a lengthy court trial, Robert was convicted of Susan's murder and was sentenced to life. While Robert battled health complications, the legal system continued to close in. 40 years after her disappearance, he was charged with Kathy's murder. He died in prison from cardiac arrest 3 months later, in 2022, at the age of 78. If these tales have you eyeing your friends suspiciously, don't miss our next video, when someone you know is a killer.